Paradise Parking Lot with Steve Barnett, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. on the Progressive Radio Network.
Welcome to the Paradise Parking Lot. I'm Steve Barnett, your host, and we've changed time from from 1 to 2 on Wednesdays to 10 to 11 on Wednesdays. So if you're an old listener, welcome to the new time. If you're a new listener, just welcome. What this program is, it's an unusual program in terms of environmental issues. We do not do sound bites. We do not preach to the converted. It's a different kind of environmental program. It's a deep dive into the complexity of environmental change. It's a program where we discuss issues that even people who are knowledgeable about the environment may not know enough about or may be somewhat confused about. And we talk to scientists, activists, skeptics. We talk about conflicts within the environmental movement, about various options, and we talk about unusual things. We try to be a program where you would listen even if you had been thinking about and active in the environmental movement for years. I'm doing this program because this is the kind of program that I would like to listen to, and so hopefully you will learn something, and it will be fun as well as informative. We're going to be on every Wednesday now from 10 to 11, and we'll have a different range of guests and topics each Wednesday. There is no single topic or theme. I look at the environment in the broadest possible way, including biodiversity, including climate change, pollutants, and even in some bizarre cases, climate on planets other than our own. So, by background, I'm an anthropologist. I've done research in India, the United States, and many countries in Europe. And I bring a kind of anthropological perspective to environmental issues. I'm not a climate scientist directly, but I kind of play one on radio. Today we're going to have a number of guests, and I want to start by talking about a Hindu perspective on environmentalism. Those of you who've listened to the program in the past know that I've had a Jewish perspective, a Christian perspective, a Muslim perspective on the environment, but I've not yet had a Hindu perspective on the environment. And we're lucky to have the author of a book on this topic, and someone who is himself very knowledgeable about both Hinduism and environmental matters, Pankaj Jain, or Jain, depending upon how he wants to pronounce it. Welcome, Pankaj.
Thank you so much for this great opportunity.
Okay, is it Jain or Jain?
Jain.
Okay, because in where I was in India, it was pronounced either way.
Okay.
Almost free variation. So, I mean, Hinduism obviously is a complex religion, and a number of people have pointed out how the time and space notions of Hinduism seem to be remarkably in sync with recent developments in physics, multiverses, all sorts of things. But I think also Hinduism is very much in sync with environmental concerns. What would be a distinctive Hindu perspective on environmentalism?
Yeah, I think it's a great introduction and great way to begin this discussion. Yeah, so Hinduism, the word itself, first of all, is English Western word. There is no such word in from Indian perspective, from Asian perspective. The term is really Sanatan Dharma. And dharma itself defines all the duties and virtues and all the great qualities, and even religious orders are encompassed by that term dharma. And dharma also defines the way that it's a sustaining force for human society as well as global or even universal ecological order. And that dharma is also connected with the Vedic term called ritam, which is kind of an ecological universal rhythm of the entire universe. So the very word dharma connects our personal order, personal duties, virtues with the ecological order. There is no disjunction, there is no disconnect between the two. So ecology, or all the natural forces, universal entities like the sun, the moon, the earth, they are all intertwined with our own human bodies and human mind, human existence. So this interconnection is one way to look at the way Hinduism looks at ecology. Second way to look at it is from several ancient scriptures and several teachings of the modern Hindu gurus and Hindu spiritual practitioners, is that Hinduism looks at every particle of the universe as divine. Because in Hinduism, the very nature, the very ecology, the whole environment is divine. So all the rivers and planets and stones and plants and trees and even every stone is divine. So with that reverence towards ecology, it's very easy to make this connection between the teachings and what can be done for the environment in our modern context. Of course, it remains a far cry from what is in theory and what is in ideals of Hinduism and what is being practiced in India currently. There is a lot of improvement to be done in what is going on in India currently. But at least these ideas, these fundamentals are very, very prominent and very alive in the Hindu consciousness or Hindu minds. It's just a matter of making this connection and making very tangible, very proactive things for the environment.
Okay, let me come back to a couple of things he said. When you talk about everything being interconnected, it sounds from a Western perspective like the great chain of being, and I think that there are similarities there as well. And when we talk about divinity in everything, how do you relate that to the veil of Maya? And the veil of Maya, for members of our audience who don't know, is the notion in Indian thought that what we see in our everyday lives, what we do in our everyday lives, is really an illusion. Behind that screen, behind that veil, is a much different kind of spiritual reality. How does Maya relate to the notion of divinity and Hindu ecology?
Yeah, Maya or illusion is that if we see ourselves as disconnected from our outside, or if we make this dichotomy between our own inside and outside, that itself is Maya illusion, because at the most fundamental spiritual level, from Hindu perspective, everything is connected, everything is one. But this Maya, this illusion, makes us being separate from so to speak, outside world, which the reality is different. But Maya makes us separate or disconnected with the ecological order or natural order. So,
is another word for that, phrase for that, maybe Advaita Vedanta?
Yeah, Advaita means that non-dual. So there is no duality between the highest spiritual being and our own existence. But the Maya is what keeps us separate from this experience, from this realization, and that Maya can be overcome by spiritual practices. There are several ways to practice Hindu tradition, by the way of chanting of the divine name, by doing great charitable or philanthropic work, or any social charity or even ecological charities kind of work. That's the karma yoga, path of action. A path of chanting that I mentioned is path of devotion. Then path of knowledge, by studying the philosophical texts and pursuing the path of knowledge, is that another way. And of course the path of yoga, which is becoming more popular in this country, is by seeing ourselves as connected in our body, mind and soul, completely in sync and harmony with the divine being. So that's the path of mind control or path of yoga. So these are the four different ways one can transcend this veil of Maya that you mentioned and be in sync with the divine being.
It's interesting that you mentioned yoga. This is a bit of an aside, but as yoga becomes more popular in the United States, at least, and in some countries in Europe, it's increasingly being separated from Hindu thought, and it's become more of just another exercise type. And I think that's a big mistake, because it misses the essence of what yoga really is and what a yoga practice really can teach and help the individual. It's not just building flexibility and things like that. It's how you are in the world itself. It's a much larger kind of concept. Although as I say, in the United States, it's being unfortunately changed. Let's go to traditional India. Pre-British India.
Right.
How were these environmental principles or notions put into play in the everyday lives of Indians?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think probably we can go even older times, maybe times of Mahavir and Buddha, when Jainism and Buddhism were very strong tradition in India before they lost their prominence. And in those times, one of the central teachings of those traditions was nonviolence and vegetarianism. So that was, I think, a great way to, if we look at our modern perspective, to cut down at our carbon footprint. So before Buddha and Mahavira, before Buddhism and Jainism were prominent, the Vedic tradition was about sacrificing animals for the fire rituals and things like that. But then came these great figures of Buddhism and Jainism, and they sort of, over a period of a few centuries, entire population, entire societies of South Asia, they became mostly vegetarians. So even today, millions and millions of Hindus and Jains living in India are mostly vegetarians. I think that is a great way to cut down their needs, cut down their carbon footprints. As we know, that there are many scientific researches now that to grow meat is the number one or number two cause of global warming, climate change. The way all the consumption of natural resources is done to raise meat for human consumption. So that is one big way that Indians have kept their carbon footprint very, very low. Second way is also in these teachings of Mahavira and Buddha and many other Hindu spiritual gurus. They always preached that to adopt renunciation in the daily practices of Hindu householders. So even though they may not be renunciants or monks or nuns, but even in their daily practices, their needs are so less that up until 60s and 70s and even 80s, India never adopted the full-fledged mode of capitalistic growth and industrial growth. Until 80s, what was called as Hindu rate of growth for economy, because the Indians, Hindus, Jains living in India, their needs were so less. They were not married to this consumerist economy ideal that we have, and now India is also adopting, unfortunately. But because of those teachings of Hindu, Buddhist, Jain gurus and leaders and other teachers, their needs were always less. They only consumed what was the absolute need for their survival, and not just buying a new car every 3 years or renovating a house every few years that we do in this consumerist economy, consumerist society. So that distinction for thousands of years, up until 17th century, India and China were the biggest world economies. So 70% of world GDP was controlled by India and China until 17th century. And still their daily needs were not based on consumerist economy. So even though they were great economies, their ecologies were still intact. They were not mindlessly cutting their trees, killing their animals in the service of consumerist economy. So even today in India, with 1.2 billion people, India is the only place you can find thousands of elephants, thousands of tigers, and all the rare species that we can't even imagine. We just have, in this country, for example, we just have 300 or 400 million humans, but with this very less population of humans, we have done, I think, a great disservice, a great catastrophe to the other species. But imagine in India, 1.2 billion humans, and still all the animals and birds still survive today because of this inherent concepts of nonviolence and seeing divinity even in animals and birds and things.